I think inadvertently, lots of places become not very people-friendly due to the sort of decisions, often about the interaction between different buildings or different projects or things changing over time. I don't think anyone out there is going out of their way to make not people-friendly places, but they're not thinking specifically enough all the time. How do I actually deal with where's that funny alleyway going to be? How safe is it going to feel? Why do we allow cars to always have the upper hand over children? Children's lives are so constrained where they're allowed to walk, where they can go, and it's because they might get run over, it's because they might get hit by a car. And we've sort of allowed the power dynamic between these things to go in a really odd direction, which I think is anti-people.
Hello, welcome to Talking Place, the podcast bringing placemakers and storytellers together to talk about place. I'm your host, Tanisha Raffiuddin. I am the founder of Concept Culture, a creative agency in London, passionate about creating purposeful brands and telling powerful stories. In this episode, it is my absolute pleasure to talk place with Hilary Satchwell, where we will be diving into what makes place truly people-friendly. Hilary Satchwell is a master planner, urban designer, and architect with a focus on large-scale housing growth, high-quality placemaking, and creating community. She is the director at Tibbalds Planning and Urban Design, a consultancy set up to make people-friendly places. Hilary has over 25 years of experience in a broad range of large-scale projects across England. She is also involved in research on planning's ability to deliver social value and social infrastructure, policy-making best practices around design and place, and design coding. Hilary's other roles include the Mayor of London's Town Architect for Angel Edmonton, a trustee of Design Southeast, a non-executive director of Future of London, and sitting on and chairing several design review panels. And if that wasn't enough, Hilary is also a member of the Part W Collective, which campaigns for greater diversity in terms of who makes our towns and cities and who we make them for. We cover a lot of ground in this episode around why movement networks, not just buildings, are the backbone of great places, why designing for women and children benefits everyone, how social value goes beyond buzzwords, and we'll also explore the concept of cathedral thinking, planning for 100 years and beyond, and why storytelling and emotion should be part of every design conversation. If you care about inclusive places, safer streets, and the future of urban design, this episode is for you. All right, let's talk place. Hilary, welcome to Talking Place, the podcast where we bring placemakers and storytellers together to talk about place.
Brilliant. Hi, Tanisha.
So, Hilary, you and I know each other through the network, part of Women in Architecture and Part W. But for those out there who may not know you, let's start with a little introduction. Tell us about your journey, how you got into urban design.
Brilliant. So I'm a director at Tibbalds, and I've been here for a very long time, more than 25 years. I got into urban design. I was studying architecture, and in my part two, which is the postgraduate bit for those who don't know about studying architecture, me and a small group of friends decided that we wanted doing a master plan rather than just a building. And we didn't really know where to start. So we went and got all the books out of the library, read all the books, wandered around the city, which is Plymouth, and came to our own view about what we thought urban design was. We did this master plan, we did this project. It went really well. I thought, wow, I really love this stuff. I really love how buildings create space between and create streets and the way they can influence behaviour and all of that. And then I just had to think, oh, will someone give me a job doing this? And Tibbalds did. In 1996, and I've never left. So I love buildings, but I really love what buildings then do to the spaces in between, how then people use them, and I just find that really fascinating.
I love how you talked about the difference between architecture and master planning and urban design, and each of them has a different definition depending on who you ask. And I know we can go on talk about hours of what the difference between master planning and urban design is, but what I've found fascinating talking to urban designers is they're interested in that overall view, the helicopter view, if you like, whereas architecture is more down to the nitty-gritty and the details of the
I'm
build.
really interested in the street level view. I think the overall view is like the master plan is thinking, like, how does it work from the top view, but also what's it like to be in? What's the street? How does it make you behave? Does it tell you where to go? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe? But that's what I like.
Amazing. So obviously you've already touched a little bit about how we experience space on the ground, but because this podcast is called Talking Place, I love to start by setting the scene with a definition. So what does place mean to you?
I think it's a brilliant word. I like thinking of places as either I like place or non-place. And I guess you might mean good place or bad place, but when you go somewhere and it feels like a place, it's like, oh, this is really working, it's interesting, it's got different things going on. So I really like the word place. It is sometimes a word, I think, that can be hard to explain to people because I guess we maybe know what it means, but we maybe mean slightly different things. But it means something, I think, that works as a piece of urban fabric or a piece of urban world that brings people together, creates streets, thinks about movement. But in good places just work on a number of different levels.
Yeah, but I think you mentioned urban. So would you say that places don't exist outside of urban context?
I think there are definitely rural and countryside places, but I guess most of the work that I do and that urban designers are involved in is more towns and cities.
That's right.
Of course, place can exist in all sorts of ways.
And it's interesting because I think another urban designer, and I had this conversation about garden communities, and people view garden communities as rural developments, but the argument is that we're urban designers, we're designing a piece of urban fabric.
An urban environment. It might have landscape qualities, it might be very spacious, but it's still an urban environment we're creating. By introducing buildings into it, we're urbanizing. Urbanist.
That, for me, that was when I had that light bulb moment. Oh, okay, so it really doesn't matter where this piece of urban design, urban fabric is, it still would be technically urban design.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So now this is another question I love to ask everybody. What is your favorite place in the world?
So I find this question so hard because I just love being in cities, towns, understanding different things. But I was thinking about this. One of the things I really love the most is when you cross over a bridge in the middle of London, and it doesn't matter what time of the day or night, but you just really feel like you're in the centre of the world. You're in the centre of the universe. So like you could be walking, you could be cycling, you could be on a bus, you could be in a car, but you cross over Waterloo Bridge or Southwark Bridge. That for me is just like you've got a curve in the river, you've got interesting buildings on both sides, you get views, it's contained. That for me is one of the places I just think, amazing.
You talk about bridges. One of my first memories of moving to London was crossing London Bridge. And then you've got Tower Bridge on the one side and St. Paul's Cathedral on the other side. And for as long as I can remember growing up, I always wanted to move to London. I don't know if it was Harry Potter or what it was, like the various influences. And I was like, I want to move to London. And one of my very formative memories was crossing London Bridge for the first time. And now I live close to Tower Bridge and I get to do that regularly. And it's every time, it never ceases to amaze me how excited I feel.
Yeah, exactly.
15 years later.
A collection of buildings, a bit of infrastructure can do that to you.
Absolutely. Well, all right, let's move into the nitty-gritty now. Thank you for sharing that. Coming back to Tibbalds, is your first job?
An architecture practice before then.
Right, okay, first job as a designer. So when we talk about stories of a place, a big part of that is people who live there.
Yeah.
And your work at Tibbalds is very focused on people-friendly places and understanding and working with communities, which is absolutely what I love. So how is this a focus on your work at the moment?
I think people-friendly places has been a thing that we like to think about at Tibbalds for as long as I've been here, and it relates back to Francis Tibbalds, generated those ideas and wrote a book called People-Friendly Towns in, I think, 1992, a very, very long time ago. But I think it's such a clear idea that we're not doing this just for the sake of it. We're doing it because it has the opportunity to change people's lives. It creates places people enjoy being, it creates homes, it supports businesses. So people, for me, have to really be at the heart of it. And that is something that we talk about a lot at Tibbalds. And at the moment, I think we're in a really interesting time because even more people are having conversations about who we're making places for and why. I guess also there are plenty of people still not having those conversations. working on some really interesting projects. Got one large-scale housing growth project at the moment where we're really thinking about specific groups of people and what they need. So exactly as you were saying before about it's a rural area at the moment, but we're thinking, how do we make a place that isn't just for everybody? Because it turns out making places for everybody turns out not to work for that many people.
Interesting.
So we're thinking about specific groups. In this case, particularly thinking about the needs of women and girls, particularly thinking about the needs of children, because also the evidence shows if you think about those groups, actually you improve outcomes for everybody. So it's not at the exclusion of anyone else, it's actually, it makes better outcomes for all. So we're thinking, how do the routes work? What would they feel like? Would I walk down that road at 3 o'clock in the morning? All of those things, you're starting to think about what does that specific group, that person need in that place? How will they get around? What will they do? And I think that really makes for quite interesting places, even at very early strategic scale master planning. So projects like that at the moment that I'm really enjoying and digging into the research. What does best practice tell us? Lots of people are doing quite interesting work around how different groups are impacted on by places, but generally that works in existing places. And we're trying to think, how do we apply that thinking and those ideas about how you feel about safety, children's mobility, all of those things to new places. And I'm finding that completely fascinating. I'm really loving it.
Amazing. So you would think that if we're saying that places are for people-friendly places is obvious.
I would say
yes,
completely obvious.
So are there any examples maybe where places have developed that are not people-friendly that you can think of?
I think inadvertently lots of places become not very people-friendly due to the sort of decisions often about the interaction between different buildings or different projects or things changing over time. I don't think anyone out there is going out of their way to make not people-friendly places, but they're not thinking specifically enough all the time. How do I actually deal with where's that funny alleyway going to be? How safe is it going to feel? Why do we allow cars to always have the upper hand over children? Children's lives are so constrained where they're allowed to walk, where they can go. And it's because they might get run over. It's because they might get hit by a car. And we've sort of allowed the power dynamic between these things to go in a really odd direction, which I think is anti-people. But no one's decided to do that. It's the result of lots of little micro decisions that have led to quite an anti-people environment.
Yeah, and I would agree. And one thing I found fascinating about London, and particularly when I first moved here, is I never saw children around the street. And growing up in Asia, I see children everywhere. They're everywhere. And it's not that cities like where I grew up in Hong Kong, Mumbai don't have cars. They do. But we used to play on the streets. It was never an issue. And I never saw children. The only time I saw children out about London was during the school holidays. And that was on my radar. Oh, it's school holidays. That's why I can see them now with their adult parents or caretakers or whatever it was like. And I still feel London is not children friendly as a city for children to be able to just go out and play without adult supervision. It's very rare to see.
Yeah, it is weird. I think that is partly a thing that's happened over time, but it's interesting that it's happened in London and maybe the UK in certain places more than it has happened in others. But we need to unpick this. We want children to be out, we want children to be playing. We don't want them inside looking at screens all the time, but yet we haven't made a set of environments that we're happy to let them out into. That strikes me as a bit odd.
Yeah.
But the children are out and about. There are some great parks, there are great play spaces, but it's quite managed. You have to go to a particular place to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, we should be making streets where maybe children have priority, where maybe cars have to stop. People have to be allowed to cross the road. They have to think about the safety first.
Yeah.
But that's kind of unpicking quite a little bit of a dynamic. And that's not saying we shouldn't have cars. It's just saying we've let the power dynamic go a little bit the wrong way. Or quite a lot the wrong way.
Yeah. So let's say, hypothetically, blank sheet of paper, designing a new place.
Yeah.
How would you go about designing a truly inclusive place that works for all groups of people?
Yeah, I think you do have to start with movement networks first. And one of the places to start is actually changing that priority dynamic. So you change it so that you have routes and connections, I think, and then you give priority to people walking, cycling, children at key points so that cars have to stop and people can just carry on walking. And if you create a connected network where you have priority as a pedestrian, as a cyclist the whole time, you can let your kids walk to school because they haven't got to cross the road. My kids had to cross the South Circular to get to school, but they did that. We knew where the crossing was, we worked it out, but it's not ideal. Cars did stop, but I think you have to plan from the beginning. You have to plan the outcomes you want. And if you want children out and about, you want them being able to walk to school, you want them to be able to play with their friends and meet up and to be sociable. We've got to unpick those things that stop them doing that at the moment. And a lot of that is about the interaction between people and vehicles.
Interesting. So movement, something so fundamental, but maybe other people might think differently. Like maybe it's the aesthetics of the place.
Sort of the independent mobility of children is such a key issue. Also, the kind of the safety of young women and girls. It's not until you talk to young women and you really understand where they won't go, where they won't walk, how cautious and concerned everyone's got about using apps to tell their friends where they are. At any point, it's possible to ever completely feel 100% that you can kind of go anywhere you like, although that would be the aim. We've got to really understand that people's lives are being constrained both by behaviours and by urban environments. We can't have it that you can't go out or you feel that you have to get an Uber to be able to go home. I want to be able to, if I want to walk around at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's what I want to do. And I don't see why anyone else should be stopped from doing that.
No, especially in the winter months when sun sets at around 4 p.m. and then you have to almost revolve your whole day around getting back home safely. As a woman, obviously, I'm sure it's not an issue for most men, but I remember recently, and I want to go on my evening walk, and my husband said, "Don't put your earphones in your ear." And I was like, "Oh, okay." It was a genuine concern that you're going out late at night alone by yourself along the river, where very people are there to give in any time, and he was genuinely concerned that I'm alert.
Behaviour. So partly society tells us to behave in certain ways, like you shouldn't be doing that. Actually, why shouldn't we be doing that? I think it's really interesting to talk to people. I've got older teenage boys and talking to them even about the routes they will take across place. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't walk across there at that time of night. And they're like, why not? Just really fascinating, different people's expectations about where they're allowed to go, where they're not allowed to go. And just, we have to have those conversations more because I think a lot of people don't realise how much their own behaviour is impacted in a way that's different from others.
Yeah.
We need to talk about it.
Definitely. And this is in conversations around all our women-led industry networks of how do we make places more safer for women and girls. And it's a whole movement. And like you said, it needs to get more traction. And I know a lot of good people who are doing good work in this space. But again, when we talk about people-friendly, then obviously the next word that comes to mind is social and social value. So we know that social value is a big buzzword now in our sector. Everyone's talking about it. And like with many other terms in the sector, it means different things to different people. So what does social value mean in the context of urban design to you?
Yeah, I mean, that thing of it meaning completely different things to people is absolutely critical. We don't have a definition of social value that is outside of procurement. So there's a procurement definition of social value in the UK. There's no planning or design or placemaking. So you can all be having a conversation about social value. And for some people, it includes one thing. For other people, it includes others. This is just a mess, actually. It makes it really hard. So social value is stuff in between buildings and spaces and how they work that makes places. It's inclusivity, it's being social, it's having businesses that can work, it's getting people into jobs and training, it's making culture. It's like social fabric, it's like the glue. And I think anything that we do to contribute to those things is social value. But actually, I've also been to work around kind of what is social value in planning, and even things like, the delivery of affordable housing. Even housing is social value. Having a home is a really important thing. And without that, you're really struggling. Yeah. So I think it's a really broad thing, but I think I'd quite like to see a definition of what we think it means in relation to planning and development in England, say. I think it would help those conversations to be more consistent.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get a situation where a tiny thing is being made out to be like, oh, it's this amazing social value thing, and some other huge thing is seen as a small, like it's very hard to compare. But equally, I don't want to spend more time measuring than actually doing. I want us to deliver the social value. I don't want us to be spending tons of money and tons of time on measurement, but actually it's the delivery of the thing that's the most important.
That's
But
so interesting. Yeah.
we could spend all of our time on perfect measurements, and it would cost more than actually doing the social value stuff.
Wow. Wow. You hear it right here. Deliver more than measure. Deliver with your
Yeah.
social value. Get on with it. Yeah. So, are there any examples of places, either that you have designed or others, where you've seen the impact that social value has brought to that particular place?
I think any well planned development project is bringing social value. If we mean specific social value strategies,
Mm.
I think the way the world is going in terms of thinking in short term and meanwhile is really, really helpful. So we're thinking about actually what should we do in the short term? How do we work with the community? So, one aspect of social value is definitely around working with the community, working with neighbours, working and to understand the place. And that's an aspect of social value that actually has been our job for a long time, but now it's called social value.
Mm.
So it's not necessarily a thing that's changed, but it's a thing that I guess now gets valued in different ways. I think it's a thing that lots of good projects are doing. I think some of it is very directly off development projects and other stuff that kind of either communities or places just do.
Mm.
I wonder if it's worth also just highlighting some of the other things, the ways of unpicking some of these things. So, talked about Part W earlier, some
Mm.
involved in the Part W
Yeah.
campaign. I wonder if it's mentioning that we've got a campaign at the moment called Built Barriers, which is, I guess, using a sort of social value lens to
Mm.
look at how existing places work, but particularly how they make you feel, and trying to sort of gather together the bits that don't work. So perhaps we could use a kind of social value led approach to kind of then try and mend some of those things. So we're interested in what doesn't work, why doesn't it work, and actually what are those problems? Because that glue, that social value that means that people can move around or places work for different groups
Mm.
is critical.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So, how can people get involved in the Part W campaign?
So definitely look on Instagram or the website, but we're basically trying to crowdsource examples of barriers that you feel in terms of your daily life, moving around. It might be somewhere that feels unsafe for you. It might be somewhere that doesn't work for you because you can't access it. It might be buildings that might make you feel really unwelcome. It could be a route you have to walk down. It could be that physically it doesn't fit. So we wanted crowdsourcing photos and images of the problem. We're then going to work through over the next year or so, kind of how we get to some solutions and what we think about why that's come about. Because
Mm.
again, I think we talked about this before. I don't think anyone intentionally makes this stuff bad,
Mm.
but unintentionally, so unintended consequences,
Yeah.
we often end up with lots of things that constrain and change people's lives and make them feel worried, fearful, in danger, and that's not good.
No, absolutely. So, get involved with the Part W campaign. And I think, like you said, unintentionally these things happen. But I can give an example of once when I had an accident and I couldn't walk and I was on crutches. And that was the first time I realized, wow, how unfriendly
Yeah.
urban environments are to people who can't walk. And I think a lot of it is empathy as well. I
Yeah.
wonder if you have a view on that. We all have our own physical circumstances, how we go about everyday lives, but there's always someone else who's less able and less capable.
Yeah.
And yes, they're the minority, but it could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone can end up with crutches.
Yeah.
And then your whole life will change. And
Yeah.
then, like you said, you don't want to be second guessing, oh, can I go out? The underground is the scariest place for someone who cannot walk.
Yeah, when you don't know if you're going to be able to get out, is steps, is the lift going to be working,
Yeah.
all of those things. But that's why we need to listen to each other more and have conversations about these things, about how places make us feel.
Yeah, no,
I
absolutely.
completely agree that we need to be more empathetic as a industry and just even in our lives thinking, and because it's very easy to get wrapped up, isn't it? Oh, this is the way I do things. But actually, what's happening to the other person? Why don't they do that? One of my favourite stories on a project I worked on ages ago was there was a play space in the middle of this housing area, and one person lived nearby the play space. They wouldn't let their children play there. They didn't like it, thought it wasn't safe. Someone else was walking about a mile to go to this play space because they loved this play space. And putting these two people in conversation with each other was really fascinating because neither could imagine that their own view wasn't the way of seeing this space. One thought it was unsafe, not good. One loved it. And it was great seeing them talking to each other. But it's that thing of like, oh, and I think it changed both of their views of that space. in that day when they had that conversation. But it's only by hearing and talking about other stories and really getting to the bottom of that, you think, oh, why do I think that? Why is my view right? Is that right? And actually, I think in the end, they probably both all played together with their kids in that space.
Yeah.
So, but it just happened to bring those two people together and to have that conversation because of a project.
Amazing. And I mean, you've been in the sector for about 25 years and you've probably designed a number of places. Do you ever find yourself going back to some place that you've designed after a number of years? And what have you learned?
Yeah, I find that really fascinating. So quite often in terms of master planning projects, I'm working at a reasonably early stage. So often outline planning, sometimes then involved through delivery stages, but sometimes not. So quite often, and there's a few places I've been back to recently where the plan is pretty much exactly as we drew, but the buildings are quite different because at the time it wasn't about controlling the appearance of buildings necessarily. And that's kind of weird, like, oh, that's that space where we have that conversation about that group of people. And I really love it. It's amazing to go somewhere and to see it shaped by the lines you've drawn on a page.
Oh, wow, that's
And
poetry.
and to really think,
Yeah.
that little route, that little cut through that we planned
Yeah.
and kind of with little houses along it, someone's built it. It's so exciting.
Oh, that's such poetry. And I think that is the difference between, again, urban designers and architects. And now I'm recently more involved with the urban design group. And someone just mentioned, yes, as urban design master planners, our work sometimes may never be realized, or it could be realized, but that's not why we do it.
Yeah.
And the gratification isn't from something actually being built, but just thinking about the place. And that really, struck a nerve with me, how urban designers think differently.
It is quite different. We're part of the story. We're not in control of the whole story. And you have to kind of just accept that. So I can be like a custodian of one little bit and help shape it and leave it in as best position as I can. But I can't control what then happens. So you don't ever feel individually responsible for a whole thing. You're part of a whole chain of people who's helped something happen. And I like that, but it is just quite different. In architecture, you're controlling, exactly what will happen. I haven't got that level of control. I think that's good. I like the idea that we're all playing different roles in the creation of this place and we're acknowledging how important all of them are in keeping it on track to be a good place at the end.
So, Hilary, speaking of social value, Tibbalds has recently collaborated with the Quality of Life Foundation for design codes for health and well-being. Can you tell us a little bit about that collaboration and what the outcome has been?
Yeah. So it's been a piece of work that's come out of a much larger group that was involved in looking at how you would apply a health and wellbeing lens design coding over a couple of years. And we recently worked with a smaller group to think, how could we publish this? How could we make sure this really interesting thinking, this lens in a way to apply to design coding, to put health and wellbeing and particularly health inequalities at the forefront of how we're thinking about that into a document that could be useful to people. This work had been done and we wanted to make sure it could get out there and that people could really think, how do I forefront this stuff? How do I use it to underpin the conversations I'm having with communities? Lots of people want to talk about how we can use development and change to improve health and well-being, and this is intended to be a tool to help us do that.
Amazing. And are there any high-level takeaways that you can share?
So really just a way of looking at it differently and to make sure that in design coding, which is definitely here to stay and something that is a very useful tool, we're not just being too neutral about it being about controlling building line or controlling frontage or controlling scale. Actually, we can use strategies around health and well-being to make places richer, more interesting, and really to deal with some of the inequalities that, again, inadvertently come out in the way places are planned. It's really about looking at an issue which lots of people are already doing. So largely this is about area-based design coding, but it can be applied to other design codes too. It's really trying to say, don't forget this topic. Here's the data. Here's the things we need to think about.
And who do you think should be looking at this guidance?
I think it's a really helpful tool for anyone looking at design coding or thinking about larger scale places, just because it makes you think about some things differently. But really, councils who are looking at area-based codes, anyone who's looking at kind of large-scale site-specific codes, But really, it's just a useful tool when I've been through it, the final document, just thinking, actually, this is just a really helpful reminder that this is again about people and about the impact on people and that we have choices.
Mm.
And it's about making good choices to deal with those inequalities and for health.
I love that. Let's make good choices. And, there's, like you said, there's probably a lot of evidence and research out there, but bringing it on, distilling it together in a toolkit is probably a good way to disseminate that good information and help each other out. So where can people find this toolkit?
So you can download it on the Quality of Life Foundation website. If anyone can't find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to Hilary for design codes. I think that's the other thing I've learned, that I think urban designers get very nerdy about design codes.
They do. And over the past few years, so I've always worked on things that are called design codes or guides. They've got much more specific about what people mean by them, very much in the kind of yes, no way. And I get that that is sometimes useful. I'm a bit more kind of in the grey areas. I'm happy for us to think about what we're encouraging, what we want to happen, and all aspects of design. If you go very much down the route of just yes, no codes, can't control or you can't influence all aspects of design because not everyone is willing to let that topic be decided in a yes, no way. Like, here's a rule, yes or no. So you end up not covering all of design. I want us to think about all of the aspects that make good places. That you need coding, yes, no, but you also need a broader type of coding and you need guidance. So I sit in the kind of let's encourage the right thing to happen. But even though you've got design codes and design guides, you still need good designers. So it doesn't get away from that. It's another really useful tool in how we make better places.
Excellent. Hilary, you have your fingers in many pies and you wear a lot of hats outside of your more formal role here at Tibbalds. But one of your most recent appointments is the Mayor of London's town architect for Angel Edmonton. And this was also one of the key reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because there are very few of you. And it's a pilot project. So tell us a little bit more about your role as a town architect.
Really interesting. So there's 10 town architects who've been appointed under this pilot project by the Mayor of London. We're all Mayor's design advocates. We're already doing a role supporting good growth and supporting what good quality looks like in London. And we've all been given a different town or place within London to help steward change, to help ask the right questions, to help push design quality, conversations about communities. And it's a really interesting role. So all the places are different. All of the roles have a slightly different because they're specific to that place. What's working really well for me and what I really like is it's an ability to go into somewhere, ask questions like, how are we thinking about this project? How is it going to deliver good places? And I don't have to think, oh, my job's on the line because of it. People can choose. If you're working in a council or somewhere, you might have different politics to deal with or different colleagues to deal with. I'm really just trying to help by asking positive, supportive questions. How can we make sure that we're getting quality here? How can we make sure we're getting really good projects and really good outcomes and bring different people together? Also, Angel Edmonton is such a fascinating place. So I'm very happy to be working in that place. So it's a small part of the borough of Enfield. It's in the southeast corner of the borough, right next to the boundary with Haringey, not far from the boundary with Waltham Forest. It's a community that's kind of one of those slightly left behind places. There's a massive regeneration project that's been being worked on for, I think, a decade. Radiant Water's not very far by. It's a little high street with things going on, a really interesting community, really interesting place. And it's lovely to be able to focus on somewhere that specific.
So cool. And I hadn't realized about the political angle. So you're essentially the community steward.
Yes, community and place steward in a way. I think it's thinking about that in that way.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to help remind people, push, like, are we asking the right design questions? Who should we be appointing to do this? How do we get that to work? So I'm not directing operations. I'm stewarding, supporting, asking the right questions, bringing people together.
Amazing. And so what do you hope to achieve as part of this pilot project?
So Angel Edmonton has got just over £11 million through the Levelling Up Fund. And so that was on the back of delivering, I think, 11 projects that range from public realm changes to improvements to parks, community spaces, small-ish interventions that help mend, repair, improve, change bits of Angel Edmonton in a really interesting way. And this comes on the back of 5 projects delivered as part of and part funded by the Mayor's Good Growth Fund that were delivered 2-3 years ago. And these were all small little intervention projects, but made a big impact in this place. I was involved initially through the London Review panel, and I reviewed some of these projects as they were coming about and could see them being delivered. And I just think that they provide fun, locally responsive interventions into this place that have involved the community. They're a great range of projects. So one of them is Workspace, Meanwhile Project Workspace, using existing garages, a little garage court. It uses as much of the existing garage fabric as possible. But it's really colourful and fun, and it's really startup. So some of it's affordable startups, so really trying to be low cost for local people who want to start businesses and want a space. Others is for established businesses who can have some workspace. It's getting opportunities into the area as well as just doing something. A piece of that area is going to be redeveloped over the next 30 years. This is something that really works for now. There's a whole range of projects, and they're very clever in the way that they've made really positive local interventions, relatively low cost, but they really have been responding to what the community needs.
That's amazing. So again, going back to what you said earlier of how you impacted a place. So maybe 30 years from now, you'll go back to Angel Edmonton and think, I was part of that.
We'll go back in 2 or 3 years and we'll see this project deliver. But
Okay,
in
yeah.
30 years, see
Yeah.
much bigger change. Because
Yeah.
you'll see this big regeneration project will have happened as well, and lots of other change as well.
Yeah.
It's nice looking at things over long term as well as short term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live in an age of social media and instant gratification. To think about, oh, this is development that will take over 30 years. You just can't think in those time frames anymore. But I guess with place, it does take that much time, doesn't it?
It does. I really love as well. There's some projects that in the world, some really interesting projects in Oslo that have been planned on 100-year timescales. And I completely love this idea that you're thinking about, they call it cathedral thinking. So you're planning for something in the timescale it takes to build a cathedral. There's an amazing library project in Oslo where they've basically planted the trees that are going to grow for 100 years, and they've had different authors writing a book every year. They're going to do it for 100 years, and then they're going to use those trees to print the books.
Oh, wow. Cathedral thinking. I've never come across this before. See, this is why I love doing this, because I learn something new all the time. Cathedral
Outside of your own lifetime, basically. What am I doing for future generations? I love it. Actually, also, there's other groups of people thinking about 1,000-year thinking. Imagine thinking about 1,000 years.
Gosh, I mean, I've just come back from a trip to Egypt, and that was a civilization where now, what, 4,500, 5,000 years later, we're still talking about it because they preserved it in a way that I don't know if they were thinking, oh, maybe people in the 21st century are going to come looking for our tombs, but here we are. And it's just fascinating the level of documentation that civilization did at that time that we are now, be it as tourists or Egyptologists or there's various terms, revisiting that culture. And just on what you said, I'm thinking, what are we doing now in 2025 that people are going to, those who come back 1,000 years later in 3025, what are they going to find? What are they going to see about us?
Those same things won't be there, but the impact of our decisions will be. London is shaped by things that are 1,000 years old. Bits of London have got streets that are kind of evolved from things that have been there for a very, very long time. So those actual buildings may not be there, but it's like the echoes of the past are still there in the shape of the place, and the impact about how we use resources and whether things. There are no buildings here now. I don't think that will be here in 1,000 years. Maybe some cathedrals. I don't know. Things made out of long
the stone. I think the cathedral stone will be there.
But the impact of those decisions we make will be there in 1,000 years' time. And I think for me, I find that a really interesting way of thinking about it. Even 100 years, actually, what do I want the impact and the legacy of this to be? Why shouldn't we be designing buildings to be at least lasting 100 years? That's what we used to do. We've sort of slightly got into the idea that because certain parts of buildings can only last 10, 20, 30 years, that we can't think much more long term.
We've gone a little off piece, but I do want to stay on this point about how what we're designing won't even stand in 100 years' time. And like the lifespan of most concrete buildings is 60 to 70 years.
Yeah.
And that's not common knowledge.
No.
And I remember mentioning this to a friend who was going to buy a property, and she's like, what? It's not something I can pass on to the next generation. And I was like, probably not.
We don't really know, do we? In some
Yeah.
cases it might do and it might work. We've got to really think about the implications of those decisions and plan for them. And I think we're quite often not doing that. But that's quite a big complicated issue.
Wow, no,
One
that
for another day.
for sure. But coming back to ancient civilizations and storytelling and those passing on stories from generation to generation. Obviously, like you said, you're an urban designer. You're working on the project in early days, but surely you're thinking about the story even in that early in that
completely.
moment.
I really love thinking about the stories of places. And one of the things, some of the projects I was talking about earlier that we've been doing is actually developing the individual personal stories. Imagine in 30 years' time, someone is living in this place. How will they get around? What will they do? But also, what are the stories now that would enable people to feel the connection with this place? Because the kind of belonging and connection is really important, as well as some of the functional things about how that will work and how people get around. So I love stories. I love things that are generated by stories. And I think the reason for that is because I really like us thinking about how places and buildings make us feel. And stories allows us to have conversations about emotions and feelings that often very much aren't part of built environment conversation.
Isn't that sad?
It is sad. Talk to your project managers. Yeah. Make them talk about their feelings. Go to your PPA with your planning officers and say, let's talk about the feelings in this place.
Let's talk about feelings. Yes, that's the key takeaway from this conversation. Let's talk about our feelings. So what would you like to see more of when it comes to storytelling in the built environment? You've kind of alluded to it, but specifically, what would you like to see?
I think I would like to see us planning more for the emotions and the feelings that we want buildings and places to create. I'd like us to be, it's just what we were just talking about, but I'd like us to be having those conversations, because the more explicit we plan in for, making people feel safe, making people feel comfortable, making people feel like lively, like we've got the ability in how we plan and design and deliver and manage different types of public spaces and the way buildings go together, the ability to do this, but we don't often use that language. So let's think about and have those conversations and plan for specific emotional responses and different ideas about what we want places to be. Let's think about, how would it make you feel? How does it make a different person feel? How does it make someone in this particular situation feel? I think it's really powerful in helping those better decisions, the more inclusive decisions. I think it really enables that to happen.
Yeah, so more emotional connections, and more genuine connections, more authentic connections when it comes to telling those stories. So not just thinking about the immediate, but the long-term impact it will have on people. So I know we talked about 100 years and 1,000 years, but coming back to the immediate future, what do you see as the biggest challenge for urban design in the next decade or so?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. So I've been doing work around placemaking and urban design for a long time. And quite often I think, things don't really change. Things appear to change, but at its core, what I'm doing now isn't very different from what I've been doing 25 years ago. Some of the factors, some of the specifics of things have changed, but thinking about place and people is an enduring thing. What I think we have to try and understand is what are the things that are going to try and move us off course along that way. I think the thinking about movement, thinking it is really going to be a thing we need to try and deal with. I think that's quite hard. It's quite a contested place and set of conversations to have. It's a good question. What are the particular challenges? I think the more we put people back in the heart of our decision making, the more easy it will be to keep on course, to actually getting outcomes that support and benefit people. The more we move into technical considerations, deciding things all the time, the harder that will be. So that's what I would.
Yeah, so putting people at the heart of your decision making, it all leads back to our opening of the conversation where we talked about people-friendly cities. How do you hope urban design will evolve in the future? So what will the students of urban design, be studying?
One of the things I think feels to me like it's happened over I don't know how long, the past decade or so, is that there's lots of interesting research and there's lots of interesting academic work going on. And then there's practice, which is there's also lots of interesting things going on. But I feel like the connection between the two is harder to bridge. I'd really like to see more of the academic thinking and the research around what are the factors that lead to good places. It's very complex because trying to measure these things, you end up measuring only little bits of things, whereas actually there's a whole range of factors. But I'd really like to see more of a conversation between research and practice and us to be learning from each other. I find it hard sometimes to see how those things practically connect. I'm quite a practical person, not massively an academic person. So maybe I just don't understand it enough. But that's what I'd like to see happening more.
I think that's a good shout. I remember after I did my master's and I came out to work in the workplace, and academia was light years ahead. We were talking about sustainable design and the tools to use to, design a building to certain code. And that conversation was only just beginning to happen in practice and mainly driven by regulations. Do you remember Code for Sustainable Homes? It's come and gone. I'm with you on that. So I guess our hope is that academia and practice find a way to talk to each other a bit more.
I think academia's got to kind of think, how would these things be directly applicable, and maybe work with practice. And I think there are people out there doing that, people very much on the academic practical side. And I think practice has got to think, okay, what do I need to learn? We've both got to be open to it. We need to know what works, what evidence for, because lots of the stuff we do is evidence-based, but it's very much evidence experience rather than necessarily like researched evidence. That's the thing I'd like to think about more.
Amazing. So what's next for you, Hilary?
What's next for me? Well, I don't know. Keep being excited about urban environment.
I don't think that's hard for you.
It is not. Anywhere you go, you're in, like, there's always a relationship between buildings and green space and buildings and open space and streets. So I'm continually excited about the urban realm.
Yeah. And do you find that when you travel with people that you tend to geek out on the detail that other people may not be as interested in?
I am constantly an urban environment. I can't ever be removed from that.
Same, guilty as charged. Like, I mean, me on more on the architecture side, but I mostly then end up, going and visiting certain places just by myself because nobody else would be as interested in them.
My family are completely. They understand it's completely normal. They think that that's what everyone goes and does, looks at buildings everywhere they go. So that's all good.
You must be looking at like traffic layouts and things like that.
Just everything. I think that's normal.
Amazing. Well, Hilary, that brings us to a close to the more formal part of our conversation, which means we're now moving into the fun part. So, Hilary, the Know Your Neighborhood quiz is a little fun quiz where I'll state 3 facts, and all you have to do is tell me whether you think they're true or false.
Okay.
The purpose is just to get to know the neighborhood a little bit more and have some fun with it as well. All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. So your neighborhood of choice is Forest Hill in Southeast London. Fact number 1. Forest Hill was originally named because it was covered in dense woodland that stretched all the way to Crystal Palace.
Oh, true.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. So this is actually false.
Oh.
But hang on. Stay with me. The name Forest Hill actually comes from the Great North Wood, an ancient woodland that once covered much of South London, but the area itself was more of a hilltop settlement than dense forest. I think that is one of our trick questions. So warm up a little bit. All right, the fact number 2, Forest Hill's network of alleyways and cut-throughs was deliberately designed to improve connectivity between the historic housing estates.
That's a weird one. It has got quite a number of quite weird alleyways that are really well used, because if they weren't there, the people just wouldn't be able to get between key points. Because it's a network of hills, you often can't get over the top of the hills. The thing the network does, it enables you to get around those bits. Oh, was it intentionally designed, or was it kind of planned in? I think someone's put them in, and there were bits that I know have been open in the past that are now closed. Complicated.
So what's your final answer?
I'll go for, they probably were planned in at the time of certain developments. It's not like the whole area was planned. It's definitely grown up over time,
So is that a true or
bits
false?
that come in. We'll go with the true.
True. That is correct. Yes. We got there in the end. So many of the alleyways and hidden paths in Forest Hill were part of historic footpaths connecting the area's estates and later formalized as pedestrian routes to maintain connectivity as development increased. So you're absolutely right. That comes from your urban design, urban design thinking. And so our third and final fact is the Forest Hill pools, now a modern leisure centre, date back to the 1880s and were originally heated by a coal-fired boiler.
Wow. I know a bit about this project. I was involved in the project. When I moved to Forest Hill in 2006, the old pools just closed. And then it was closed for a long time. And a group of us worked with the council. Always the most positive conversations. A group of us worked with the council to try and find a solution to rebuilding or reopening the pools. I think probably it did have a coal-fired boiler. So what's happened is that we ended up keeping part of the old building, and a group of us did little urban design diagrams to help demonstrate that this was possible. That then the council then developed up. They had different people do concept designs. So the bit of the old building is kept. It's part of a trio of 3 buildings, all like the civic buildings of Forest Hill are all next to each other. 2 of them are there, and the pool's kind of bits of it's there with the modern building around it. I think that's probably all true.
Excellent. Well, it is true. But yes, I like the way you were thinking through the fact. But yes, Forest Hill pools first opened in 1884, making them one of London's oldest public swimming baths. Did you know this? I did.
Those actual pool structures are not there anymore, just the front of the building. But yeah, it's interesting that it was one of the oldest.
Yes, and in the early days, the pools were indeed heated using a coal-fired boiler, and it was a common method at the time. Imagine that. Wow. So 2 for 3, not bad. I do have a bonus one because I was really curious about it, and I wanted to hear what you think about it. So apparently local legend has it that J.R.R. Tolkien once lived in Forest Hill and took inspiration from its green spaces for Middle-earth. I mean, your reaction says it all, but what do you think?
I'm not a massive fan.
Okay.
Middle-earth. Well, it's very green. It's one of the things that is very green. It's got lots of trees, got lots of green spaces. I've not heard of a Tolkien connection, but that could easily be the case. I'm going to go with true. It sounds exciting. That it might be true.
Yeah, no, that is actually false. It is one of these urban myths. Okay. So there's no historical evidence that Tolkien lived in Forest Hill, but it seems to be a fun urban myth. However, the Great North Wood and nearby park could certainly resemble landscapes from the Lord of the Rings. Maybe that's why that comes from. I thought it was really fun and too obvious. I wanted to hear your take on it as someone who lives there.
Yes, it's not a lot like how I imagine Middle-earth, but has our understanding of what that might look like been influenced by films we've seen rather than necessarily the books. But it's all too long and epic battle-y for me.
I don't recommend books then. If you can't handle the movie. Anyway, Hilary, this means our time has come to an end. This has been so fun unpicking your brain and bringing out the urban design nerd in you. Thank you so much for talking place with me. I've learned a lot, and definitely the cathedral thinking is something I'm going to go away and do a little bit more research about. So all that's left for me to do is to thank you and wish you all the best for everything else that comes your way in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Hilary. We'll talk soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to join the conversation on social media with the hashtag #TalkingPlace. I would also love for you to leave our podcast a review and subscribe to all our podcasts and YouTube channels so you don't miss an episode. There's so much more to explore when it comes to creating good places, and I'm excited to do a deep dive into other topics with you in our next episode. I'm Tanisha Raffiuddin, and it's been my pleasure to be your podcast host. Thank you for listening. See you again next time, where we'll continue talking place. Talk soon.